Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell, and our guest today is Lloyd Freestone. Lloyd is from Kimberley. It's great to have you here, Lloyd. So your book is Lost, a Loss of a Legend. So Lloyd, I'm just going to give you the book, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the premise.
Well, basically it's based on a hockey player that runs afoul of a motorcycle gang, and he takes refuge in rural Saskatchewan. He was a pro player that he never won the Stanley Cup.
Okay.
And he ran into a bike gang up on the Rogers Pass. And the leader of the gang at the time was raising all kinds of problems with him in the restaurant. And then they followed him to their house in Salmon Arm, where they brutally raped and murdered his wife and daughter. Beat him up pretty bad. And he managed to get away and kill all of the gang. Ended up in prison. They were charged him with all kinds of manslaughter and stuff like that. And then he had to stay in prison for 7 years. And then when he got out, he took refuge in rural Saskatchewan, trying to hide from the leader of the gang that really wanted to kill him, because his fiance and his brother was in the got killed.
So it sounds like a pretty colorful story. So what sort of inspired you to come up with the Canadian biker theme?
Well, it's hard to say what exactly happened there. When I started, I was at work one day and I had this thought run through my head. You know, I was there when he moved in, and I had to, okay, now what happened, who moved in and all this stuff. And it's basically told in the first person part by the RCMP officer that lives next door to the guy in Saskatchewan.
I see. So why the Saskatchewan connection? Why did you set it in a small town, I understand, fictional town in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, Rossburg, Saskatchewan is a fictional town. It's southwest of Saskatoon.
Okay.
And I have ties in Saskatchewan. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan. Played football with one of the guys that I mentioned in my book. He played with the Saskatchewan Roughriders for 18 years. And actually, the football team in Rossburg went to Gull Lake to play that team in the 9-man provincial playoffs. So.
I see. So did you ever play hockey in Gull Lake?
Oh, that's where I learned to play hockey, and then I carried it on when I moved to Alberta and then moved into BC here.
So how long have you lived in Kimberley?
Since 1989. I've lived in BC since '73.
Okay. So let's just talk specifically about your book. So how long did it take you to write it?
About 6 months is all it took.
Okay. And how did you go about getting it published?
Well, I'd had my first book, Intervention, published through Ex Libris down in the States, but I wasn't happy with the final result. They didn't do their share of the promotion end of it. I found Dorrance Publishing through Rose Dog Books.
Okay.
And I went that route, and it was all inclusive, a lot cheaper than it was through Ex Libris. But I'm not sure if it's still the way to go or not. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my next book if I publish another one.
I see. So this was a self-published book?
Yeah.
How have you been promoting the book, Lloyd?
Well, I did a book signing in November.
Okay.
I've had so many health problems I haven't been able to get out and do actual promotion work, and this is basically the first real kick at the cat I've done.
I see. Now, if I understand right, you're pretty prolific when it comes to writing. This is, like you said, your second book, but I understand you have been working on a number of other ones.
Yeah, I've written, and I have ready to publish about another 17, 18 books.
Oh, wow. So what's motivated you to sit down and do all that writing?
Well, I had, when I was at work, I worked at Sawmill and Canal Flats, and I had so many knee problems. I was off work a lot with my knees, and instead of sitting there watching TV, I started writing books.
I see. So you've written a whole bunch of books. You just got to get a few of them published now. Interesting. So tell me about the process. How do you sit down and actually make that happen?
Well, that's kind of a weird story, because basically when I sit down at the computer every day, I never know what I'm going to write. I read through what I wrote the day before, and then I start typing. You get those two fingers going and on the keyboard, and I type for about an hour, and then the next day I come back, I reread that and start working again. And I have typed myself into a corner many times.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about your book. What's the reaction been? It's been out for a little bit now.
It's been out for a while, yeah. I've had quite a few people really say they really enjoyed it. In fact, I got a brother-in-law who, the only thing he ever reads is country books, or country and western books, shoot 'em up. He really liked it. So, I mean, if he likes this kind of a book, I think other people would too. If you like a hockey story, it's there.
Right. So it's got the Canadian elements of a hockey story throughout the book.
You bet.
How did you develop all the characters in the book? I noticed as you mentioned, you even have a real life football player in there.
Yeah, well, like I said, I went to school with Roger Aldag in Saskatchewan, so I had to mention him because Dusty Scholl, the main character, who just came out of my head, he took over and started coaching the high school football team, and they actually went to play Gull Lake in the story, and so Roger Aldag, I know sometimes does go help coach the Gull Lake football team. So.
Okay. So it's a little bit of drawing on your own personal experience and then elaborating on that.
Yep, absolutely. And there's some of the things that happen in the book during hockey games actually happened to me.
Okay.
They're quite amusing, actually.
Yeah. So you're pulling from personal experience,
Yeah.
and you're incorporating that right into your book.
You bet. Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, I read in your bio that you graduated from school when?
1998.
Okay.
I was 44 years old.
Okay. So tell us about that.
Well, I worked at the sawmill in Canal Flats. That was owned by Crestbrook Forest Industries.
Okay.
And once they started getting all kinds of computer automation and everything into the mills, they figured that their employees should actually know how to use computers and stuff. So they set up training centers. And I went to the training centers and I took some computer courses and I got my grade 12. And it's through the one of the courses I took, it was called Communications 12, and we had to write a lot of short stories for it. Okay. And I took it in there, and the instructor said, you know, you should write a book. And that's where it all started.
Okay, so that was sort of your motivation,
was
got
it,
things
yeah.
rolling.
Yeah.
So from there, you've written a couple of books, and you've got 18 more in the works. So,
yeah.
Well, that's pretty impressive, Lloyd. So when it comes to actually getting a book published, self-published, you said you're a little bit unsure as to what direction you would take in the future. Any thoughts behind that? Why would that be?
Well, it's not cheap, and I'm retired, so and all the health problems I had, I never managed to save a whole lot of money. So, you got to do it when you have the money to do it, and you pick the cheapest option. Sometimes that's not always the best, but you take what you can.
Right. Well, congratulations. We appreciate you taking the time to be here, Lloyd, and telling us a little bit about your book, and we anticipate your future books.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate
Thanks again for being a guest. So you've been watching Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. I'm talking today to Dave Butler. Dave is our guest, and Dave has recently put together a new book. Dave, what is the topic of your new book? Let's start out. What is the title of the new book?
So the new book is called Full Curl, Keith.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the book.
So it's a piece of mystery fiction. It's the first of 3 books in the series. It basically, the sort of main protagonist in the book is, I would say, a hard-edged, caustic park warden by the name of Jenny Wilson.
So what inspired you to come up with a mystery series based on that topic?
Well, it's actually loosely inspired by one of the cases that I was involved with when I used to work as a warden back in Banff National Park years ago. It's a story that I've always wanted to tell. Of course, it's mostly fiction, but it's based on a bit of a seed of truth, and I've really taken it and run with it and had some real fun. I'm really enjoying the fictional part of this because it just takes me to a different place, allows me to explore some new characters, some new perspectives, and also some of the issues that we face in Western Canada.
How did you get into writing, Dave?
I've been writing, Keith, nonfiction for many, many years, and I've always wanted to move into fiction. I actually was doing a travel writing course with Angie Abdu at the college, and Angie wanted to get what she called a directed studies course going, so she phoned and asked me if I was interested. And I had this book that I had kind of started years ago but put on the shelf, and it had about an inch of dust on it, and she persuaded me to pull it back out and use it in the directed studies course. So we actually had to do a chapter a week in the course, and she pushed me to keep going, was very encouraging and very positive about it. And by the end, I had a novel after taking the course with Angie. It was a fantastic experience.
Sounds interesting. So from that point on, you had to get a publisher. How did that all work?
Yes, as many authors will tell you, I have a large pile of rejection letters from publishers and agents. But once I finished the book, I took a step that I look back on now as a really good step, and that was I submitted the book to an awards program in back east through the Crime Writers of Canada. It's called the Unhanged Arthur Award.
Okay.
It's for the top unpublished crime fiction book of the year. And I was lucky enough to be shortlisted for that. So I went to a gala dinner in Toronto. Unfortunately, I didn't win, but fortunately, I was able to meet all sorts of wonderful people, agents, publishers, other writers, all of whom were very, very gracious. And it turned out that I met the folks at Dundurn Press, who's now my publisher. And after some conversations and some discussions back and forth, I ended up with a 3-book deal with them, which was more than I had even hoped for. Wow. So it was very exciting.
So this is the first of the series, is that correct?
That's correct. There's at least 3 in the series, and I've got 4 and 5 and up to 6 plotted out. So depending on how the first couple 3 do, I'm hopeful that I can keep the series going into many books.
Dave, can you give us some insight into the intrigue, the mystery that's involved in your story?
Sure. Well, what it is
without giving away the whole.
Yeah, that's always the secret of a mystery. It's really what happens is that the main character, Jenny Wilson, discovers that there are animals going missing from Canada's national parks. So when she realizes this, she goes on she undertakes a complex investigation that really follows, it's a trail of deceit, distraction, and murder. And eventually, with the list of victims growing, both human and animal, she's really becomes in a race for justice, I would say. And ultimately, that takes her back and forth across the Canada-US border and takes her to a place that, in some ways she feels she might not come back from.
So I understand you're planning to launch the book at the end of September, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So this is, we're going to have the launch on September 30th at Lotus Books in Cranbrook, BC. I'll do a bit of reading, we'll have a Q&A, and hopefully sign lots of books for folks who might want to read them.
Sounds great. Can we just explore for a moment your writing style, how you go about writing? Do you consider yourself a disciplined writer? Do you write every day? How does that process work for you, Dave?
Like most writers, I've got other jobs I do, so you have to fit it in your spare time. But most of my writing occurs on weekends and evenings. I really try to, there's the joke about writing, whether you're a plotter or the other kind of writer, you just let things go. And I tend to try and be a plotter, but at the same time I'm finding with my characters now, they take me to some unexpected places. So oftentimes I'm finding I have great plans as to where a chapter or a sequence of chapters will take me, but the characters sometimes take me in different directions. So I try and do that. I try and get about a chapter a week done if I can, and then keep working on that. And then once I've got the book kind of finished, I usually do a number of major revisions. I send it out to some beta readers, so some folks who will read it for me. And then afterwards, the revisions continue, and then I have to get it into my publisher at a certain point, and there's deadlines for each of the 3 books in the series. So sure. I try to get as much of that done as I can.
So you've written the first one. Are you in the process of writing number 2 and number 3?
Thanks for the question. Number 2 is actually done. I've finished, my beta readers have had a look. I'm in the process of doing the revisions on it now, and it has to be to the publisher by September 1st. So when I get to that point, then I'll be right into number 3, which is basically plotted out, but I haven't really started writing number 3 yet.
Interesting. When it comes to writing, how important are mentors, someone that you can sort of follow their example or sort of bounce ideas off?
Really important. From a writer's perspective, someone like Angie Abdu has been nothing but brilliant for me. She's really helped, pushed and prodded, and I've had some really great readers along the way who have really asked me the right questions and really focused on some things in the book that I might have missed, or asked certain questions that really got me thinking in a different direction. But most importantly, getting people who understand writing and understand reading, and reading is just as important, to be able to get them to look at it and say, this is how I read that, this is how I perceived it. And then that might help me to realize that maybe it didn't come across exactly the way I'd hoped it would, or I need to add more detail in a landscape or a character, that kind of thing. Super important.
Okay, good. Let's recap it and wrap this up. So name the book again.
It's Full Curl. It's the first in the Jenny Wilson mystery series.
So I'm taking it Jenny Wilson is the main character?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And plays a central role throughout the book?
Yes, absolutely.
And you're anticipating it in the next series as well?
Yes, I think throughout this current series, the readers that I've had so far said she's a really interesting character, and they look forward to more in the series. So I'm looking forward to seeing where she takes me.
Well, I look forward to reading it myself, Dave. Congratulations on putting together your first book, getting a publishing contract. Full Curl will be out, as you mentioned, at the end of September.
Right. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks for being our guest. So this has been Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I'm really pleased to have as our guest Jody Jacobs. Jody is based here in Cranbrook. And Jody, you've just published a new children's book, The Man and the Bear. So congratulations, exciting project for you.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
So tell me about the inspiration. How did this book come about?
Sure. Well, this book was based on a song written by my great-grandmother, honestly, probably about a century ago. Okay. It's been passed down to my kids, so about 5 generations. It's something I've known my whole life as a song, something my great-grandmother sang to my grandmother, sang to my mother, sang to me, and now I sing to my 2 boys. Okay. And it was actually when I had my first son, and I actually remember sitting at my office at UBC Okanagan at the time, right after mat leave, and thinking, I want to do something. What can I do? And I think I was sort of craving a way to maybe, work from home or do something for my family and get out of maybe like the daily sort of 9 to 5 grind with an hour commute on each side. And I thought about the book and I put it to paper and I emailed a friend at the time who's a really great artist and I said, would you be interested in this? And she said, not totally. Right now I'm very busy. I just had a new daughter. And then I got pregnant again and it just sort of went to the sidelines. And then about a year ago, I was talking with my grandmother, and she's 82 years old. She said, I would really love to see this done. And at that time, I thought, yeah, it's time that we did this. So, I started my own business. I'm working from home now, and the timing's there. So I kind of did it off the side of my desk, and I'm very lucky because throughout the last 15 years of my career, I've been in touch with amazing editors, and I know lots of people who have worked in publishing, and I know great graphic designers and illustrators and artists, and I have a ton of support. And then me, myself, I do marketing. Right. So it was just kind of like I have the capability to do this. I have the support network. I have a lot of support in town here, and my grandmother wants it, and it's time to go. So
it seemed like everything aligned just right to make that happen.
It did.
So let's talk about the illustrations. The illustrations are really neat in the book, and makes the book come alive and so forth. So. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Totally. So the illustrator is a friend of mine named Tyler Pentland, and I actually met him when I was working at UBC Okanagan, and he's an incredibly talented artist, painter, and graphic designer. And he's a very good friend of mine and a colleague, and I knew immediately when I wanted to take this on, it would be him that I wanted to work with. And we're very kind of kindred spirits with like minds. And I sent him the story, and I thought, good luck, because I know what this looks like in my head. Right. I'm so close to this. And he sent the sketches in a few weeks, and I was like, I love it. I love the old man. I love the expression on his faces. You totally nailed it. Bright, colorful, fairly, simple designs on white background pages. And he was just a joy to work with. And, right up to the last minute of when I was working with the printers, I was 11:30 at night. I forgot an R in this word. Oh no! And don't worry, don't panic. I'll get it. And
so tell me, how long was that process? How long did it take you?
So it was probably about a year from the time I actually decided to do it to the time I got it done, and I finally put a deadline on it. Like I really want to make like the winter's market and get to Christmas sales, and it's time to do that. So November 1st was my deadline, and I probably just started going hard on it about 3 months before that, back and forth with the designers. So.
Oh, good for you. Yeah. And what's the initial reaction been?
It's been really, really good. I think people can tell that this is a very personal project, and there's a lot of love in this book. It's a tribute to the women in my family who are very strong women, rebellious women, and as well as this, my brothers, even for my brothers, like this, we all know this song, we all sing this to our children and our family, and to put it to paper, and I think people can like feel that love. And so I've had people email and just say, like, I love everything about this book, and I'm so excited to give it to my children. And so that's really special for me to hear because I'm so close to it. It was really difficult for me to edit it and look at it critically. Right. It was tough. I sing it as a jingle in my head when I read it. Yeah. So having that feedback from the community, I'm like, because the nature of my business being in marketing and public relations is, I can promote the heck out of somebody else all day. But when you kind of turn the spotlight back on yourself and do something for yourself, and I've had a lot of support in the community for it, but it's nerve-wracking. Right. So.
Well, good for you. It reads really well, and it's a fun book, and I can just see the young audience eating it up. So I wanted to ask you about the process. So the song already existed? Is that what you're telling me?
It did, yeah. So the book isn't exactly like the song was. There was a few things changed based on what made more sense for print.
Yeah.
And also, something that was wrote so long ago, modernizing it a little bit, had to make sure that phone was sketched like a cell phone and not a old dial-up, which nobody would know what it was, which actually Tyler had drawn in the original proof. But yeah, and because I was working with a friend and colleague who I really respect, it was a very, natural, easy progression. We're both laid back, and I started kind of exploring what I should be doing to, publish, and whether I wanted to seek a publisher. And I actually sat down with Maurice Fritz, who does Kootenay Living magazine in town, and he said, well, you've got a designer, and you've hired an editor, and you own a marketing company. So you want the name of my print guy, And I thought, yeah, okay. And then, once I made that decision, it was just like full steam ahead. So.
Oh, good for you. And so what's your family think of the project?
They love it. They're so excited. Yeah, they're so excited. My mom, was selling books to friends and cousins and a lot of people all over the place. And I'm really lucky because I think I have a lot of people rooting for me and a lot of people on my side. So I've been literally shipping books to, as far as Australia, from, people who are friends with my husband to Victoria to all across Canada. And
so if I'm not mistaken, there's a bit of a charity element to that too. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So again, the nature of my work or whatever, I do a lot of cause marketing, and I truly believe that if you're going to do something, you might as well try to do it in a way where you're going to benefit the most amount of people. Right. I know Jordan McDonald from Big Brothers Big Sisters really, really well. She's a fabulous executive director. She runs the organization awesome. It's an organization that does so much for children in our community. And if I was going to do this, I knew I would want to tie it to a nonprofit. And Big Brothers Big Sisters, there's so many good organizations in town that work with children and for children. But that one just made sense, and I have a relationship with her. And yeah, so 10% of every book sold goes to Big Brothers Big Sisters, and at the launch, it's 50% of every book sold.
Wow, that's a nice tie-in. Good for you. What about the future? Any other projects in mind, or?
I think so. Like, I used to write a lot. I used to write all the time. I would get up at 3:30 in the morning with coffee and Baileys and start writing. And then after I had kids, I lost that a little bit. So I want to get back into it. My kids are 6 and 4 now, and I'm trying to figure out who I am as a writer now. Before I had kids, I was very edgy. I swore a lot in my writing. There was feminist undertones, some sexual innuendos, which is kind of ironic now that we're talking about this very clean children's book. But now I'm trying to figure out who am I as a writer now. I've matured a lot, and I miss it, and I want to get back to it. I do have another children's book that I've kind of been working on and playing around with, and Tyler's excited about my artist, so I think that'll be next.
So lots of creative ideas to come?
I hope so, the roots of them. The roots of them. I feel like I need to work more to get better, to get to the level that I would like to be, to produce more.
Well, Jody, congratulations on the publishing of your first book. It's a fun book to read.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the reaction that my grandboys have to your new book. So it was a pleasure to read, so congratulations. And it's great to have you as a guest today, so
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to be here, and I'm really honored, and it's awesome to sit down and talk with you, and really appreciate your support.
Great. Thanks, and we'll have you back when your next book comes out.
Great.
And, my name is Keith Powell, and this is Talking Kootenay Books.